Joining me now from Washington is Ali Al-Faneh. He's a senior fellow at the Arab Gulf States Institute. Ali, it's always great to have you on with us. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Ali, let me get your immediate reaction to what Americans woke up to on Easter morning, that message from President Trump. What do you make of that escalation from the president, threatening not only just power plants, but bridges as well? Do you think it'll be effective?
Well, we are now 37 days into the war, and we still don't know why President Trump chose to attack Iran on February 28th. And we have no idea if he has an exit strategy. I see the tweet earlier today as a mark of his frustration, and the Iranian government is looking at it in the same way. But they also believe that they have found one of the few weaknesses of the United States and that of President Trump. And that is, as you actually mentioned earlier in the program, the price of oil. So Iran cannot defeat the United States militarily. What they are trying to do is to beat President Trump at the gas station by increasing the price of oil and turning the American voters against the president.
And that perhaps more dangerous than any weapon is the control or the influence, great influence over global markets. What did you make of the language, though, that the president used in his post, and how do you think average Iranians are likely to respond?
At the time that the war began, there were some Iranians who believed that the enemy of their enemy is their friend. In other words, if they are not sympathetical to the Islamic Republic, they found President Trump as some kind of a savior, especially because he said, wait, help is on its way. That was his message to the Iranian protesters. But increasingly, Iranians are seeing civilian targets being hit by the United States and by Israel. And the kind of language that President Trump is now using is the kind of language that Iranians heard from Genghis Khan the Mughal. 1,000 years ago, Iran was, Persia was destroyed by the Mughal hordes, and now President Trump is doing the same thing. This is very dangerous and unbecoming for a U.S. president, and I hope that the president remembers that there will also be a day tomorrow and next month and another year. Iran and America have long-standing relations, and these kind of statements do not exactly help the future of relations between the two countries.
Ali, I also want to get your thoughts on something else we heard from the president this weekend. He spoke to Fox News, and he said that the U.S. sent weapons to Kurdish forces with the intent of arming Iranian protesters. That essentially confirms some reports that we had earlier here on CNN. What do you see as the president's motive in sharing that? Is it perhaps to inspire some sort of a groundswell, some sort of people's revolution inside Iran?
I see that as another mistake of the president's, because the Islamic Republic was making the argument that the people who protested against the regime in Tehran were American agents. They were paid for and armed by the United States. Nobody was willing to believe the claims of the Islamic Republic. Now President Trump is proving the regime right. The other element, which is also just as bad, is that President Trump chose to arm members of an ethnic minority in Iran, the Kurdish minority, which is a history of separatism. And that makes the average Iranian even more fearful of the U.S. designs for the future of Iran. Is President Trump actively trying to foment a civil war in Iran, after which there will be partition of the country that they love? These signals are not particularly helpful for President Trump. I think President Trump would be best served listening to the advice of Vice President Vance, who has been very, very clear throughout the entire war that the United States should be careful and not to entangle itself in forever wars in the Middle East.
Ali, I want to close by tapping into your expertise and maybe trying to get your assessment on what could be the Iranian regime's state of mind right now. And the question of, can we assume that Iran thinks that it's winning at this point, especially when you consider the state of play? You have the uranium that hasn't been retrieved. The regime seems battered but coherent. And then one of the possible options that's being discussed right now, according to new reporting during these indirect talks in Oman, is that Iran would like to keep a register of the tankers that navigate through the Strait of Hormuz, effectively formalizing its control of that crucial waterway. So when you add it all up, I mean, can we assume that at this point?
For the Islamic Republic, mere survival is victory. For President Trump, well, we don't know what victory means. And as for the Strait of Hormuz, President Trump and Israel have started a game that they don't know how to stop. Now, Iran appears to be in control of the strait, and even after a ceasefire, this is likely to continue.
Ali Al-Faneh, grateful for your expertise. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.